Imagine this. The world's most powerful leader stands before the United Nations and declares, "Your countries are going to hell." That's exactly what Donald Trump says in his recent speech to the General Assembly. But this wasn't just another fiery address. It was a calculated message to the world, a message that challenges the very foundations of global cooperation and sets the stage for a new era in international relations. In the next few minutes, we'll break down what Trump says, what it means, and why it matters. Trump says that the United Nations is a failed experiment and that its open border policies are leading countries to ruin. He claims that nations allowing uncontrolled migration are destroying themselves and warns that unless leaders reverse course, their countries will collapse. He asserts that under his policies, illegal immigration into the U.S. has stopped, positioning himself as the only one capable of stemming the tide. Trump says that Western nations have lost control by accepting migrants they don't identify with, and that cultural dilution is real. He singles out Europe, stating that immigration and their suicidal energy ideas will be the death of Western Europe, casting climate policies and migration as a twin threat to sovereignty. He accuses European leaders of destroying heritage in pursuit of political correctness and claims many are ignoring what he calls the fundamental laws of nature. In one pointed line, Trump says, "If you don't stop people that you've never seen before, that you have nothing in common with, your country is going to fail." He also targets mayors like London's Sadiq Khan, saying, "You have a terrible, terrible mayor. Now they want to go to Sharia law." Trump says that climate change is a hoax, calling it the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world. He attacks green energy policies, telling the UN that these would weaken nations and enrich regimes that ignore rules. He says that predictions made by the UN and others were wrong, and that renewables have shifted manufacturing to polluting countries that break the rules. He argues that the Western push toward renewables is self-destructive, and that reliance on fossil fuels is more honest and sustainable. He also attacks European nations for continuing to buy Russian energy, even as Europe criticizes Russia over Ukraine. They're funding the war against themselves, Trump says, asserting that these purchases undermine the European stance and should be treated as acts of hypocrisy. Trump says the UN is failing. He accuses it of offering only empty words rather than meaningful action. The UN has such tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential, he says, sketching a body crippled by inaction. He says he ended 7 wars, each without help from the UN, and that the institution never called him, never followed up with any action. He contrasts his supposed achievements with the UN's inertia, but in a later meeting with Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Trump offers a compliment. He says America is behind the United Nations 100%, though he stresses that he may disagree with it. Trump says on Ukraine that European nations must stop buying Russian energy before they can help Ukraine fully reclaim its lost territory. He declares Ukraine can win back every inch of what was lost if Europe steps up. He threatens tariffs on Russia if the war continues, largely placing responsibility on Europe. On the Palestinian question, Trump warns against recognition of a Palestinian state, arguing it rewards terrorism. He demands the immediate release of hostages taken on October 7th and criticizes previous hostage-for-prisoner exchanges that released only a few at a time. He maintains that peace negotiations must resume and insists on stronger leverage against Hamas. Trump says he endured mechanical sabotage. He complains of a broken escalator and malfunctioning teleprompter. He jokes that if the First Lady hadn't been in great shape, she might have fallen. He says, "These are the 2 things I got from the United Nations, a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter." He ties these mishaps to his larger critique of institutional dysfunction, yet UN officials pushed back. They say the escalator stopped because a safety mechanism was triggered, likely by a videographer filming the Trump delegation, and that the teleprompter issues were handled by Trump's own team. Reuters. What should you watch now? First, Europe's reaction. Trump's blistering critique was aimed squarely at European leaders, but how many will respond forcefully? Will they condemn or recalibrate their policies on migration, energy, and alliances? Second, possible funding shifts at the UN itself. Trump's harsh words against the institution combined with his promise of support may set the stage for negotiations over budget, reform, or influence. Third, how allies in Ukraine and NATO react. Will they align with Trump's demands to cut Russian energy imports, even at great economic cost? Fourth, the credibility test. If Trump's claims about ending wars, immigration control, or climate science collapse under scrutiny, critics will pounce. But if some of his positions force course changes, that may amplify his influence. Finally, media and public backlash, both domestic and international, could define this speech's legacy beyond the moment. Here's my view. The speech is more than campaign rhetoric. It is an attempt to rewrite the compass of U.S. foreign policy and challenge the post-World War II order. It stakes a claim that sovereignty, not cooperation, is now the highest calling. The contrast between criticizing the UN and then pledging support is deliberate. Trump wants leverage. He seeks to say, I can tear this down, but I can also rebuild on my terms. That tension gives him room to maneuver, but there is danger, burning too many bridges, losing allies, being perceived as erratic or untrustworthy. Those are real risks. The incoherence between his demands and capabilities may backfire. Western nations, especially those with deep investments in climate transitions and multilateral frameworks, aren't easy to bend. Now, let me pose a few questions to you, the viewers, to think about and discuss in the comments. Do you believe Trump's rejection of green energy is a visionary challenge or reckless denial? Do you trust that his claims about immigration control are real, or are they inflated political posturing? Which European capital do you think will retaliate hardest? And in what form? Will the UN survive this assault, or is its legitimacy already damaged beyond repair? If you were a foreign minister in Europe, how would you respond to such a speech? What do you think? Is Trump's vision of national sovereignty a necessary correction or a dangerous step backward? How should European leaders respond to Trump's challenge? Should they double down on cooperation or push back? Is the UN's current structure capable of reform, or is it time for a new approach to global governance? Trump claims to have ended 7 wars. Do you believe his foreign policy has been effective, or is this an exaggeration? With the world at a crossroads, what role should the United States play in shaping the future of international relations?